Baruch Hashem. Today's Daf Yomi is we're recording now the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh. We're recording it on Friday, and the Daf is Samach Daf 60, and we're going to start on the bottom of the Tes of a base, and the Daf is dedicated for a Shemir for the Chayalim, Hatzol for the Shvuyim, and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael. And Shimon says Afa Kisha. For Shimon says Kisha for sorcery is also one of the seven Noahide laws. My time at Rabbi Shimon says the Gemara. What's his reason? It says in the pasuk Mechashefa lo sechaya that a woman who's a sorceress shall not live. And then the very next pasuk says Kol shochevim behema mosimas. Whoever sleeps with an animal will be put to death. And we say Kol sheyeshno b'kol Kol shochev. Whoever is included within the prohibition of not allowed to sleep with an animal, and that also includes Noahides because it's a form of arayos. So therefore, it also is in the prohibition of mechashefa l'sechaya. Rebbe Lazar says, Rebbe Lazar says the women that the Noahides are also prohibited in this making this mixture of the animals. That we say there's a prohibition of mixing the animals and also grafting onto trees. That's what that's what we had said earlier. So that's what the Brisa says back on 56b. So the Gemara says, not immediately what's the source for Rabbi Elazar that he says also the Koyim for Rabbi Elazar he says Damakras Lukosai Tishmoro. It says in the pasuk, "You shall guard my laws." So the chavot is koyim that you're not allowed to mate animals and make in your field kulayim. And so we say, what does it mean when it says this lukosai tishmaro? It means the chukim shechakakti l'chakvar, that this is included within the laws that I've already made for you, i.e., the Noahide laws. And your animals you should not combine, and also your field. And we say just like animals, it means to like through mating or combining. So to your fields with hakava. And so that's why we say grafting is going to be prohibited, but not actually planting seeds together, because it has to be similar to harvas behema. Just like harvas behema is something specific onto something specific, and not just mixing up the seeds together. So then the Gemara says, "Ma it's just like your animal in the land of Israel or outside the land of Israel. Also, your fields in Israel or outside the land of Israel prohibited." Says the Gemara when it says in the pasuk Ushmartem as Chukosai ves Mishpotai. Why don't we say when it says in the pasuk in Acharei you shall guard my laws, and there it seems to apply to all the laws of the Torah. So why don't we say Chukim shechachakti? Why don't we say that also there, which refers to the whole Torah? So why don't we say Noahides are commanded to keep the whole Torah? Where it says Hasam ushmartem es chukosai, there it says you shall guard my commandments, which means the hashta, which means the current commandments. Hacha es chukosai tishmoro chukim demi kara tishmoro. But here it's talking about the commandments that were already commanded, i.e., the Noahide laws. I'm Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha taught that we learned in our Mishnah that Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says that when the judges, if there is a Berkas Hashem, they say Yaka Yosi es Yosi, Yaka Yosi es Yosi. May Yosi strike Yosi. So Amar Vachabar Yaakov Eno Chayiv Ad Shivarach Shem Ben Arba Osios. You're only responsible when you do the Berkas Hashem, the name of God. That's the four-letter name of God. La Fluke Ben Shtei Osios. It comes to exclude the name of God that has two letters. Then you're not liable. So the Gemara says Pshita. Isn't that obvious? It says Yaka Yosi es Yosi Tanan. It says specifically Yosi es Yosi. Gemara says no matter the time we might have thought Milsa Ba'alma Hudanaka. You might have said he wasn't giving a specific example, but just a general example. So it shows that word. And so therefore that's what Vachabar Yaakov is teaching us. Kamashmon. Ika the Amr alternative version. Amr of Vachabar Yaakov Shmamina Shem ben Arbios Nami Shem. We learn from here the name of a four-letter name of God is also a name of God. So isn't that obvious? Pshita. Yaka Yossi, it's Yossi. It doesn't say Yossi will strike Yossi. And the Gemara says, no, Mal the Tema Adika Shem Rabba. You might have said, you require a greater name of God. What's the Shem Rabba? The either the 42-letter name of God or the 12-letter name of God, different sizes. So we might have thought that. So therefore, we say no. Umil Sabama do nothing. It's not a specific example. Kamash, no, it is a precise example, and so therefore, even four-letter name is to be a violation. Nigmar, then once you come to the final decision, you have to say the name out loud. And when the judges hear this, they stand up and they tear their garments. And how do we know the judges have to stand? So Amar Yitzchak bar Amida, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, the Ehud came to see Eglon, the king of Moab, and he was sitting in the upper chamber. That was basically, he was in the upper chamber where it was cooler. The king himself had this. Vayomer Ehud, and Ehud said, Devar Elokim li elecha, I have the word of God to you. Vayaka me'al kisei. And Eglon rose. It's a logical argument about Eglon Melech Moab. Eglon was the king of Moab, and the only thing he knew about God was the nickname for God, Elokim, not the actual name. And Amad, and he stood up, Yisrael v'shem ha'mafura shalachas kama v'kama, a Jewish person, and the actual name of God. How much more so does he need to stand up? Says the Gemara, Korin Mino, and how do we know he's supposed to tear? Well, the source for this comes that when Sanhedrin was invading the Jewish people, he was invading Yerushalayim, Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda, and it says, Vayavu al Yaakov ben Chelkiyahu v'shavna sofer v'yoch ben Asaf ha'maskir al Chizkiyahu. So basically, the Chizkiyahu's three people came to Chizkiyahu, and they said and they came Kruye begadim, Agidu lo es divrei Rav Shah. Okay, and they said to him the words of Rav Shakeh. And so we see from here that why did they come to him? Why were their garments torn? Because they heard, Rashi says, the blasphemy that they heard from Rav Shakeh. And so since they heard the blasphemy, and so we see from here that you're supposed to tear the garments when you hear Rahman son such a terrible thing. And Lomach, and you're now out of sew back these garments. You have to leave them torn. Manoah, what's the source? Amar Rabbi Avo, as you kriya, we compare it to the other time it says that the garments were torn. That was when Elisha heard about the death of Eliyahu. Ksiv, it says by Elisha, ro'eh, when Elisha saw this, Umitzaek, Avi, Rechav Yisrael, Parashav, when he saw that Eliyahu was taken up to heaven, it says he tore his garment. And he tore them into two. And so, Vayikareim Lishnayim Kiraim, he tore them into two tears. Mimash Rashanamar Vayikareim Lishnayim, and from the fact that it says that he tore them into two, in Yodea Shankram, I know that they're torn. So Matam Omakraim, why did it say that they're torn at the end? Muhammad Shankriim La'olam, they're always torn. That they're always torn. Tana Rabbanan means that you can't mend it. Echad Hashameya, Echad Shameya Mipi Hashameya. One who hears and one who hears from the mouth of someone who hears is obligated to tear the garments. So the Gemara says, but the witnesses, when they repeat it, they don't have to tear it. Because they already tore their garments at the moment that they heard it. What does it matter if they heard it when they tore it? They're hearing it again now. So the Gemara says, don't say that. Why? The king tore his garments. The king tore his garments when he heard it, but they did not tear it. Somebody who hears this Berakas Hashem from the mouth of an idolater is not obligated to tear his garments. In Tomer Rav Shakeh, well, then why did they tear for Rav Shakeh? Yisrael Mumar Haya. He was a Yisrael. He was really Jewish, but he was a heretic, and so therefore they tore for him. V'amar Rav Yehuda Mashmuel and Korin El Al Shem Am Yuchad Bovad. You only tear the garment for the name itself. You only tear the garment for the name itself. But not if it was a nickname of God. And these two rulings of Shmuel, who says that if it's an idolater, for it's not the name, you don't tear. They argue with Rebbe Chia, the Amar Rebbe Chia, Hashamea Azkara Bizman Hazeh, Eino Chayav L'Kro. One who hears the mention of God's name nowadays is not obligated to tear his garments. Shemea Azkara Bizman Hazeh, Eino Chayav L'Kro. Shemia Tal American, because if you don't say that, Nitmal call begadim krayim. So he says if you hear the blasphemy today, you don't have to tear the garments, because if you're not going to say that, all the garments will be filled with tears. And so the Gemara says, Miman, where does he learn this from? Ilmo, Israel. If you want to say he's learning this from a Jew, mi pekire koi hai, are the Jews so basically are they so hefker? Are they so uncareful that they're blaspheming like that? It's obviously not the case. It's obviously the case it's from Ovdei Chachamim. And now if it is only for a specific name, Mi Gemiri, do they know that name? Obviously not. So we're talking about a case where they're saying a nickname of God. We see nowadays we don't do it. But originally we would be obligated to tear. Shema Mina. And the second person says, Hasheni Omer Afani Kamo. He says, I'm also like, he says, I heard just like the first person. Amar Shlaka Shema Mina Afani Kamo. Kasher Bedine Mamonos Bedine Nefashos. So we say, generally speaking, if the second witness says, yeah, ditto, whatever he said, that's valid testimony by a monetary case and a capital case. Umala Huda Avid Rabbanon. And it was only a mile that the rabbis made a extra stringency to say you have to repeat it. But here in this case where it's not possible to repeat it, so the rabbi said, let's go back to the biblical law. Because if you're going to say it's disqualified, because if you're going to say it's a biblical law, because if you're going to say that it's not valid, because it's not valid, we would kill somebody, meaning to say, obviously we wouldn't do that. So therefore, we prove from here that it's not biblically required to repeat the testimony. It's just a mile of the Rabbanan. And this third one says, Afani Kamo. Why do you need the third witness? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva. Well, this is stomach Rabbi Akiva, the Makash Gemol Shem. This Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva, who says that you compare 3 to 2. What does this mean? This was learned in Mesechus Makos. Rabbi Akiva compares 3 sets, the third witness to the first 2. That if you find the third one to be Karav Apostle, to be disqualified, then all the testimony is disqualified. So therefore, we check him exactly that if he was that if he would be contradicted or hazama, then his testimony, all of their testimonies would be disqualified. That's the position of Rabbi Akiva in Makos. So now we go into the Samach Hamabei. He says the Mishnah, Oved is Kacham, and that's somebody who worships idolatry. Echad Oved, whether one who's actually worshiping, Echad Mezabeach, whether one who brings a korban, Echad Makater, or burns an offering, Echad Menasech, or he pours a libation, or he does bowing, or he's accepted upon himself as a god. Where he says, you are my God. But if you embrace, you kiss, you sweep, you sprinkle water, you wash it, or you anoint, or you clothe it, or you put shoes on it, you're violating a negative commandment. So in the first case, So is idolatry, and from the point on of aval, but if one embraces from that point on, it's just a law, a prohibition, but it's not the death penalty. Rashi says as long as he's not usually killed with that act. So then we say, says the Gemara, I know there bishmo, if somebody takes a vow in the name of an idol, v'amakayim bishmo, or you fulfill it in his name, over below tate. He violates a negative commandment. Because it says, V'shem Elohim acharim lo taskiru. Apor atzmo Baal Peor, they used to worship this idol called Baal Peor by defecating. So if you defecate to the Baal Peor, Zui Avodah, so this is its service. You defecated in its direction, and so therefore, if you do that, you're liable for the death penalty. Zorik Evel Markois, somebody throws a stone to Markois, Zui Avodah, that's its service. What does it mean? Echad Oved, Amar Birmia, Hachak Amar Echad Oved Kedarakov, Echad Mizbeach. So it means whether you worship the animal, the idolatry in its usual manner, or if you do these other forms of traditional worship, even though it's not the usual way to serve this idol, you're going to be liable. Why does an account sprinkling? Amar Abaye, sprinkling is a libation. So that is the sprinkling. How do we know that these halachos that if you do any of these things, you're liable, even if it's not the avodah zarah's typical manner? Tana Rabbanan, it says in the verse, if it said one who slaughters shall be destroyed, I would say and it's talking about somebody who slaughters the kachim outside. Tamalomar leilohim, to the gods. That refers to somebody who makes a offering to idolatry. I only know somebody who makes a slaughter. How do I know if you burn or the incense? The verse, built to Hashem levado. It has to be only to God. Reik on avodos. Retain avodos kul Hashem yuchad. So the Torah reserves all of these avodas just to Hashem. So since Zvicha went out to be interpreted as something that's done on the inside of the temple, how do we know Ashtachava, which is usually done outside the temple? That's onesh shemana, so we know the punishment. How do we know that there's a warning? You're not allowed to bow down to another god. I might think it comes to include embracing, kissing, or putting the shoes on. So it says if you make a mizbeach. Why did Zvicha come out? Why was it singled out? To compare it and to tell you, just like the offering of a sacrifice is inside the temple, you're responsible for death. So anything that's inside the temple, you're liable for death. So now the Gemara says, let's analyze this. Torah is referring to one. I would have said it refers to slaughtering outside the temple. So that's not a death penalty, that's kares. So the Gemara says, no, ki asrubei tatoa, ki lo asrubei kares. I might thought if he's warned, he gets death. If he's not warned, he gets kares. Kamashon, we don't say that. All right, we'll stop here. This is obviously we're going to go over this on Shabbos, but this is taste of the daf of Shabbos. Yasha koach.